Anybody seen the letters on the business cards? Oops, of a real estate broker? Seen the CRS, all that fun stuff, GRI, all that stuff just means that I sat through some courses. Maybe I had to do some production, some sort of level of numbers of sales, and I was learned about various detailed kind of niches. SRES there is called Seniors Real Estate Specialist. That's about how to work with people that are maybe going to be facing an estate situation, end sunset versus sunrise, like the opposite of first time buyers, that sort of thing. You might learn about reverse mortgages, might learn about what it is in a 55 and older community. And one important thing about the SRES designation is if you have it, you can get on the list with various assisted living facilities to be like a go-to person to refer to. So if somebody comes and checks in, maybe they'd say, well, Neil's an SRES. He can help you sell that house if you're now not going to live there, but you're going to be living in the assisted living or nursing home. And then CRS and PSA is pricing strategy advisor, and RENE is real estate negotiation expert. There's a million of them. And I tell you that to tell you this. Once you've finished and gotten your license, taken pre-licensing, you have the license, there's more education available. Obviously, you're going to want to learn how to do the business. But one thing that you're going to have as an advantage, even though you're brand new, is that you know more than the average consumer. You already know the laws and the rules. You had to in order to get the license. So rest assured, you already are an expert, right? Use that confidence to your advantage. And if you have nothing else to do, right, go ahead and get some designations, right? You can gather some of these things up. Usually they're a couple of $100s. One thing that you need to do before the designations, though, is something called post-licensing. We'll get more into that, but as you can see down here, I'm an educator in both pre-licensing as well as post-licensing and continuing education. The pre is what you're in now. The post is what you have to do within your first 18 months of getting your license. I'll tell you this a million times because it is testable. Testable. Hopefully you have a notebook and a pen nearby. This is what you're going to want to write down. It's one of those things. Write it down. Post-licensing. You have to take all 3 post-licensing classes within 18 months of getting your real estate license. If you don't complete them, then your license status goes to inactive and you can't do real estate. When you get your license, after you successfully complete this class, take this class exam, the class exam and passing this course by taking the class exam, that gives you permission to take the state exam for North Carolina. That is called the PSI exam. PSI is the testing facility. I never remember what it stands for, but I will talk about the PSI exam. That's the big one. That's the one the class is preparing you for. So here's the timeline. Take the class exam, the final, and then passing that lets you take the PSI exam. Once you've passed the PSI exam, what you have is a real estate license on provisional status. The provisional category is a better way to say it. On inactive status. You have an inactive provisional license. You can't do real estate yet, but you do have the license. What do you think you need to do to make your license active? You need to join a firm. You need to pick a broker in charge. I say pick a BIC, broker in charge, the acronym BIC. You'll hear that a lot from me, from everybody. The BIC is the one who runs the office. The BIC is the one that everybody in the office looks to for guidance. The broker in charge is literally in charge of all the brokers. Now, they're going to be more in charge of you as a provisional broker than they will be a non-provisional broker. The non-provisional broker is someone who has completed the post-licensing courses. So once you've done those 3, and I'll show you this as a slide, don't worry about it. You will definitely get tired and you will learn this. You'll get sick of hearing it. The 3 post-licensing classes, which by the way, you can take in any order. Once you've taken those, hopefully sooner than 18 months, but no later than, right? Now you are no longer a provisional broker. Now your BIC likes you more because they're not as responsible for you as they were, right? The thing about a provisional broker and the broker in charge is that if the provisional messes up, the BIC can get in trouble with the real estate commission too. The provisional broker would get a letter from the commission saying, hey, we got a complaint. Looks like you did something wrong. Send us your files. Send us your side of the story. And that notification, we call it affectionately the big brown envelope. I don't even know if they mail it anymore. I think it's definitely an email. They'll call their BIC when they get that because their stomach just fell out of the bottoms of their shoes. And they'll say, oh my gosh, I got the letter. And the BIC will say, I know, I got it too, because I might be in trouble for what you did. That's how hand in hand you have to be as a provisional with your broker in charge. They need to know what every transaction is about because they're sort of like on the job training. What you're learning in this class is laws and rules, but you're really not learning how to do the business. You're learning how to stay out of real estate jail. The BIC is going to tell you how to do the business, and they're going to make sure you're complying with the laws and rules along the way. Some BICs are better at it than others, as is the case in any field, right? So pick a good one, pick a good firm, pick a good BIC. So post-licensing, and then CE. CE is continuing education. Most fields have some version of that. We do too. And you have to take continuing ed every year. We have to take 8 total hours. It's 2 classes, 4 hours each, for a total of 8 hours of CE every year from everybody, provisional or non-provisional. All brokers have to take CE. Sadly, and I'm sorry for this, sorry to report that all of this education you're getting in pre-licensing and post-licensing, none of it counts toward your CE. Post-licensing doesn't count. You can't find a post course that also counts toward your CE. It's 2 separate animals altogether. Another testable item, by the way. CE doesn't count for post. Post doesn't count for CE. The CE is 2 4-hour courses. The post-licensing is 3 30-hour courses. Each post-licensing class, each of the 3 of them are 30 hours each for a total of 90 hours. Testable, by the way. Doesn't matter what order you take those in. 301, 302, and 303 is the name of them, the number of them. And I'll just give you a spoiler. All they are is a deep dive version of what you're learning here. But you get a little more out in the real world where the rubber meets the road level of understanding. And the class is not really like this. This class tends to be more of a, hey, is it going to be on the test? That's our focus because you can't be in the business until you pass the test. With post, you're already in the business. So it's a lot less concern, stress, emphasis on passing a test, even though there are tests at the end of those post classes. It's not the same level of intensity, I should say, because they want to keep you in the business. Remember, how many agents did we say? How many people have licenses, active licenses in the business? Tell me in the chat. Do you remember a rough idea, rough ballpark of what that number was? How many active broker licenses? Yeah, about 82,000. Some other little tidbit that's a testable item is it's more than just taking your CE to keep you in the business every year. You also have to pay dues. You have to pay a fee every year to the real estate commission. That fee is $45. $45 to renew your real estate license. 82,000 people times $45 is something that I wish I could get in on. It's about $3.5 million. So the commission doesn't want to run you back out of the business. They want you to succeed in post-licensing, right? So keep that in mind. A couple of housekeeping things. Let's see. Here's my info. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. Feel free to jot that down. Ask me for it anytime. It's also on the Notion website that I'm going to give you. For Notion, I will be emailing you an invitation to it. It's a private classroom just for us. You and me and Jason is all that it will be. We're the only ones that will be in the Notion classroom. You can type questions and I will respond. And so all that is referred in there as well. But here it is if you want to jot it down while we have it. Again, this is a pre-licensing class made by the Real Estate Commission. They created the syllabus that we have to teach by because it's all about the laws and the rules and the basics of real estate in 2 broad categories: a national section, and a state section. So some of the content is going to be related to nationwide real estate. Same thing applies out in the Midwest as does here as to what is the definition of real estate. That's sort of a national item. But then there's some very specific to North Carolina material as well. That's the state portion. Things like, well, how many post-licensing classes do you have to take? 3 of them. That would be in the under the state portion of the exam, the North Carolina specific portion. We already talked about how you rename yourself. You guys know how to do that. A couple of things he's already addressed. Don't forget your lower left corner. You can mute. Stay muted, by the way, until you want to speak up. But just to keep control on that ambient noise, the background noise that you and I can't control. If my dogs or wife walked into the room right now and started talking, same thing for everybody, right? So I try to ask you to stay muted, but feel free to unmute anytime and talk, speak up, ask a question. And then video is important, guys. I've got to keep a watch on your faces because your full face, well lit, has to be on video. You've noticed that we're recording this. It's required at any time. The Real Estate Commission could come in and say, hey, Jason, we need to see the recording from that November 2nd class. We want to look at it. We want to audit your class. So obviously whatever we do is locked in. So we need to make sure we're complying so as to make sure you get credit for the course. Chat's important. Tell me in the chat. Let's practice. You're already good at it, but tell me in the chat, why do you want to get your license? Why is it that you're thinking about getting your real estate license? You'd like to make this work? I've heard all kinds of reasons. I've heard sometimes it's a positive reason, sometimes it's a negative reason. I've heard I like to help people. I've heard, well, I had a great agent and they inspired me. I've also heard I had a terrible agent and I figured, well, if that Yahoo could do it, surely I can do it too. Let me give you a word of warning about that one. Just because your agent was an idiot, and that is well possible, just because that may have been the case, they still had to pass this class, pass the course, and that doesn't mean that the class and the course is easy, okay? So sometimes I hear that. What else? Tell me in the chat. Other reasons why do you want to get your license? Looking for participation so I can have that chat log and share it and make sure that I keep those accurate records. Oh, that's good. You manage an apartment complex. Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. More about the business. Some people want to get the license because they just want to do their own real estate and they might want access to the multiple listing service. See what those houses are selling for out there. Oh, that's good, Benjamin. It works for an agent. That's a nice advantage to have. Now, as to that, no offense to anybody's friends, family, bosses who are agents. Be careful what advice you get from them about this course. Sometimes agents who are out there and successfully out there doing the business are the worst ones to get advice from about how to pass this course. Be careful what you listen to. If you ever have a question, if there's ever a conflict about something you see out there from advice from an agent or from some other resource online, run it by me. I'll give you an idea. Is this going to be helpful or not? Is this something to even consider? And we encourage you to go out there and seek other avenues, and we'll actually give you some suggestions of others. You already got that in, I think, an orientation email, a little bullet point list of various online resources. But not everybody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And sometimes they'd say things that are flat wrong. And just run it by me. If you ever have a question and it conflicts with what you hear here in the class, let me know so that I make sure you get the right information. Let's see, help people get in the business. That's good. This is a great way to help people, guys. This is an emotional. Many of you will start on the residential side. Who, by the way, wants to do commercial? You maybe see some or fully 100% commercial in your future. I see a couple of hands up. Yep. And you know what? It is quite possible for a brand new agent to jump right into commercial. I've taught post-licensing classes. There was a 25-year-old woman in my post-licensing class. She passed the real estate exam. She jumped right in with both feet, joined a commercial firm, and was killing it. And sitting in my post class to get those requirements out of the way so she could just keep on and not go inactive, right? So it doesn't matter what age. The thing about it, though, the commission warns us is make sure you align yourself with people who can guide you in whatever the thing is that you specialize. whatever it is, your BIC should have commercial experience if you're going to be a commercial broker. Don't sign on in a firm under a BIC that doesn't know anything about commercial if you think that's going to be a direction or anything that you want to get in. Could be property management eventually. You can't be a property manager while your license is provisional, though. You have to be non-provisional to be a property manager, or you can manage your own stuff without a license at all, of course. Let me catch up here in the chat. Network. Oh, yeah. Create relationships. Good. That's a good mindset to already have in place. You bet. Who has a advanced degree in real estate? You know the one. The HGTV PhD. Anybody got the HGTV PhD? You're just an expert because you watched all the shows, right? Now, you'll run into clients out there who think they know more than you because they've watched all those shows, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't tell them that they don't know more than you. You roll with it. You're like, okay, that's a fair perspective, interesting perspective you're asking me about. Well, here's how it applies to North Carolina. Those shows, right? They're carefully edited. They don't really show. I would never pop champagne bottles because I got a listing, because we don't have a closing yet, right? I'm not celebrating until the money is in my bank account. I'm not celebrating a listing, although I'd be happy. I'm just a little more leery about, let's make sure we get this thing closed first. That's good. Oh, that's interesting. You host Airbnb listings. Yeah, that's you know what? It's a new kid on the block, isn't it? The Airbnb phenomenon is sort of like, makes me think of Lyft and Uber. What things happen in industries to kind of shake them up a little bit. It's still kind of too new, really, to see where Airbnb fits in with real estate laws and rules. It gets a little gray sometimes, gets a little weird, but that's good. That's still real estate, still important for staging and how to draw people in and make them interested in the product. Okay, great. We're going to use that chat box quite a bit in the course. And he already talked you through the gestures at the bottom of your screen. You can leave a thumbs up or a myriad of other things. I will have the room open for you right at 5. Feel free to start immediately or sign on anytime as of 5. But I won't, I'm not going to engage with you. If you have questions, I'll be around and I can answer them. But I would rather you sign on earlier than right at 5:30. If at all possible, please try to sign on early. You can mute, you can turn off your video and just be there. You don't have to even be there. Just come back to the computer when it's time to start, rather than a bunch of people chiming on, logging on while I'm trying to talk and get into the actual meat of the course. It just helps me out if you could at all do that. I know sometimes people are off work and it's a struggle to even make it home in time, but just do your best there if you could. So yeah, that's a good question, Gregor, about staging. Staging, meaning, in case you don't know, just making the house appear its best. And that used to just be a thing agents did, and then it got a name. So there's various levels, there's various ways you could do it. It depends on the market, though. How competitive is the market? In the last few years, 3 or 4 years, you kind of didn't have to worry too much about staging because why? The lopsided economics of our industry, the major seller's market that we've been in. Now, we're still in a seller's market, but it's not been as crazy as it was. Very lopsided in favor of sellers, though, these last few years, to the point where I ask in every CE class that I teach, usually in the spring, by the way, is when I teach the CE classes, I'll ask the agents who are doing the business, hey guys, how many multiple offers are you involved with? And they're all involved with every one. For a while there, every sale involved multiple offers. How much did you have to offer to win the house? Anybody have any guesses in the chat? How much do you think they had to offer to beat everyone else out? Yeah, there you go. Sort of. 10,000 over, 20,000 over asking price, 50, 100,000 over asking price. My favorite one was this. An agent said my winning bid for my client, it wasn't an over asking price thing. It was something called due diligence money. Anybody familiar with the term due diligence money? Looking at faces. Okay. Face. You can nod, you can raise your hand. Due diligence money is basically a non-refundable deposit that a buyer gives a seller once they agree and to sell it. Once it goes under contract, that buyer has to give that seller money. They make the check out to the seller, and it's not coming back to the buyer no matter what. Even if the house doesn't appraise and the buyer says, well, I'm not buying it because it won't appraise for the full value, I'm walking. They're walking away from the due diligence money. Even if the roof leaks and the seller won't fix it or any myriad other repairs needed, the buyer can walk away, but they're walking away from that non-refundable due diligence money. That is a North Carolina rule. There are other states that have due diligence money as well, but North Carolina is one of them, and we haven't always had it. I think it's maybe been about 8 years. When you've been in it as long as I have, everything seems like the new rule. So I often forget when things were implemented, but it's been 8 or 10 years that we've had this due diligence money label. So we have something called earnest money, and we also have due diligence money. 2 checks the buyer usually has to write in order to go under contract. Well, my favorite story, when I ask how much in due diligence money are you writing or seeing out there from these other agents, any guesses? How much non-refundable due diligence money do you think these agents are dealing with? Their clients are having to write checks for how much money to convince that seller to sell to them? 25 was sort of the original number. Back in the day, it was 500, 1,000, maybe 25 would be the upper end. But when we got to such a lopsided market, it got crazy. 5,000, 10,000 is the low end. It got to 20 and 50 and $100,000 of due diligence money, non-refundable. And my favorite story was $400,000 non-refundable due diligence check. That buyer was serious. They were like, you know what? I bet they had lost a few. I bet they had tried to buy a few in the past and lost them and were like, forget this, I'm winning this one. And here's the kicker. $400,000 non-refundable due diligence check. The price, thank you, Rebecca, great segue, $400,000. That seller was happy, right? That's crazy. They basically said, I've got all the money. You don't have to fix anything. You're going to waste your time with those others or just pick me. And they won. Of course they won. Now that is a good point there, Matthew. That 400,000 is a credit. It's not like gravy on top. They didn't end up paying 800,000. So the 400 or whatever the normal due diligence amount is, even say it's a $400,000 house and it was $20,000 due diligence. That's $20,000 less the buyer's going to need to bring to closing because they already gave it. So that is true. It's not whipped cream on top, so to speak. Anyway, Zoom room open at 5. We start promptly at 5:30. We will end at 9:30. We talked about chat. Now, fair warning, in case you didn't already get this, when Jason was talking about it, if you try to not work at this for like 3 weeks before it kicks in and you're like, oh gosh, I better make some effort here. If you go 2 or 3 weeks without being on it, you're probably wasting your time. You've probably dug a deep enough hole that it's going to be hard to get out of. It goes fast. There's a lot of it. There's just a lot of material. There's other reasons that people are worried about this course. Will you tell me in the chat, what concerns you, or what have you heard about the course that is concerning, as far as how challenging it might be? What sorts of things are kind of a red flag for you? Yeah, once you get in the business, it's going to take a minute to make some money, sure. The test is hard. Okay, not what they expected. Okay. How about math? Anybody math phobic? You don't have to admit it, but math is a thing for many people. You are not alone. Don't worry about that. I try to give you a couple of different perspectives of how to deal with the math, but let me just kind of break it down to this. It's essentially the bulk of the math is at its most complex. It's essentially a simple algebra equation. It's like 2 times 3 equals 6. What if I said 2 times what equals 6? You would know in your head 3 because of life, because you go to Target and you can probably count back change in your head and just do life in your head. So it's really that. And I'm going to try to bring the math of this course down to that level. So whether you think linearly, like your traditional x times y equals something, normal algebra thing, you know two things, what's the third thing? There's also a graphical way to look at it called a circle formula or a T formula that kind of tells you by placing it in the right spot what math you need to do. Do you need to multiply or divide? Long story short, I will do my very best to make that comfortable and real and not scary for you. So here is something I'll be sharing with you when it comes to the math. And that T formula just sort of looks like this. 2 times 3 there at the bottom equals the thing on the top. But if you already know the 6 and the 3, then you divide the thing on the top by one of the things on the bottom. And that's it. It's just this circular kind of a relationship. And as we go through, I will share with you which things go into which spots. Some of you are like, that's stupid. I don't even like that method. And that's okay too, because that's what I'm going to do is show you different ways to do things, and you pick the way that works best for you, and that's how you do it. I'm not asking you to learn all 3 or 5 ways to do everything. Pick the one that works and clicks in your brain. That's what you should focus on. So it is definitely a college level course in terms of how much material you need to fit into a short time frame. So how you learn best visually, maybe audibly, maybe tactily. Are you writing notes? It can be useful to do a little bit of all of them. That's why I like you to keep a notepad handy. So when I tell you this is a testable item, write that stuff down. And even if you can't take the full note, make a reference to a thing to go look up later and use that textbook, right? Make those notes in the margin, highlighters, all that fun stuff. You've got to study outside of class too. It will not work for you to sit here with me and that's all you put in it. You've got to put more into it than these 84 hours. It's just the way it is. It's going to take time. You're going to need to have a talk with the loved ones in your life, the people you live with, whoever they are, whether you love them or not. Might be a roommate situation. Well, whoever, let them know, look, guys, I need your help over these next 10, 11 weeks. You've got to give me room. You've got to let me out of some of the obligations that I've been holding up on my end here recently. You've got to give me a pass on some stuff because I've got to put in this study time. Now, you might have to do some little personal hacks. You might have to go to Target and it was really something you got done in 20 minutes, but it took you 2 hours because you sat in the car in the parking lot and had some peace and quiet. Whatever it takes. It might be that you get up an hour earlier. It might be that you stay up an hour later. It might be that you eat while studying at lunch or breaks. You might have a regular job. Many people do this and they have a full-time job or they're students at a university or heck, you can be 18 and be sitting through this class, by the way, and get your license. So whatever it takes, I can tell you now, it's going to take a special effort. Find the time, not just find it. You got to make the time. You're not going to be able to watch, well, there's only a couple more episodes of Handmaid's Tale, or I guess the, House of the Dragon, that's over now. Whatever you're watching on Netflix or Hulu, just put off until January. This is your Netflix, right? I cannot impress that upon you enough. You have some allowable absence time. Try not to use it, but it's there. But it's only there for like emergencies. Don't try to use up to like the last hour's worth of missed time. And then you say, well, so-and-so died. Okay, we're sorry they died. And that is a valid excuse. But did you really not? You couldn't show up those other 10, 12 hours that you've already missed. You're already kind of riding the line. Make sure you have enough room for the unexpectable there at the end. Here's what you need. Normal supplies. Take notes. Use things. Have a dumb calculator. The exam allows you to have it. Not this kind. Not this one. Not your phone. You can use your phone for studying, but not in the exam because your phone can obviously store things more than just numbers. So you got to have what I call a dumb calculator. Use little Post-it notes to mark pages in the huge book. It's 800 pages in this book. But you don't have to know every single page. The syllabus helps you figure out which part of it you do need to focus on. Highlighters are good. I like to color code. That really kind of helps me to differentiate things. Not any particular color for any particular topic, but it's nice just to see, oh, this little batch of green stuff is about this thing, and oh, here's a blue thing, and that's different. Whatever it takes that helps you get it stuck in your brain. Here's some tips. Read the units. Unit just means chapter. This book calls it a unit. A chapter is a unit. Try to get that read before class. And I would suggest that you read through it, kind of skim it first. In fact, what I would really suggest is that let me share it with you. Here we go. All right, here's any given chapter. And in the front of the chapter, you're going to get some terms. So I've highlighted some terms. Read them over. Read those words over. Some of them you won't have any idea what they are. But then as you're reading through the chapter, you'll be, oh, that's one of those initial terms I saw. And then reading through the chapter, have that syllabus open and identify and mark the things in the chapter that you saw in the syllabus. Be proactive. When you first go through it, just kind of, read through it, skim through it, but then go back through and be conscientious, be proactive by using the syllabus, finding what's in the syllabus, marking it in here. And then you'll see some things labeled VIP. That means obviously extra important, usually pertaining to North Carolina. It says, this is a North Carolina thing. There you go. In North Carolina, VIP. So those are going to be important. And they're going to be on which part of the exam? The state part, right? Because the state part is about the North Carolina stuff. And then in the very back, you've got what's called a key point review. There it is. Key point review in the back. That's just going to summarize the important points that you just covered in the meat of the chapter. And then most of the time they will have questions. They'll have like multiple choice questions just to kind of get in the habit, develop your muscle of taking a test. Who has test taking anxiety? Just hold up your hand, give me a nod. Yeah, that's another one. It's math, it's test taking anxiety. Those are top two. And it's either because tests were always a struggle for you or because maybe it's been a while since you had to take one. And then also in this class, I try to be inflective and keep it interesting and use sounds, but it's still the end of the day and you probably had a long day already. So we're battling that fatigue already. And I do appreciate that. I try to help you fight against that stuff. Let's see, catching up in the chat. Oh, I'm going to give you a heads up of what units we will be covering. And so tonight we're pretty much mostly doing orientation and then also some license law, commission rule. And let me see here. So the license law and commission rule material in your textbook starts on, the Relink book starts around 638. But I'll get to that in a minute. I'll help you see how it all kind of fits in. So let me come back to my little presentation here. Here we go. So we've got read the units, complete the quizzes before class, make a list of any questions you have. Feel free to put them in Notion, but at least bring them to class with you as well. And those key topics, the key point review, ignore that I wrote Google Classroom. I was going to try to use that, but I chose Notion instead at the last minute because Google Classroom was just kind of clunky. And then always compare the syllabus with the textbook. That's how you don't have to read 800 and some pages of this book. It won't be many less, but it will at least help you focus on the stuff that you're going to be tested on. Keep in mind, the Real Estate Commission wrote the syllabus. Dearborn Publishing wrote the textbook. They put more info in there than you need to pass the test. There are some things that the commission has decided not to test you on anymore. They don't publish this book. Dearborn is not going to publish an 800-page book every year. They don't have a new edition every year. When I started teaching in 2018, it was the 9th edition. And then a couple of years ago, they came out with a 10th edition. So hopefully you have your 10th edition. So they make changes. The commission says, you know what? We decided not to require this thing in the math anymore. So the math part of something called the Government Rectangular Survey System, you don't have to know how to calculate math there. You just need to know the terms associated with it. That's something we'll cover, I think, in chapter 1 or 2. So tonight, we're going to cover license law and commission rules, some of it. We're going to then tomorrow get into chapter 1 and review what we talked about tonight. So I will give you an insight as to what's coming, and eventually I'll give you a whole full page. I don't have it made up yet because it varies depending on how often you meet. The classes aren't always Monday, Tuesday, right? Sometimes they're Monday, Wednesday. Sometimes they're full day or weekend or something. So I've got to make a custom study guide for you just to give you some idea of what's coming. So review the units covered, do any homework assignments. I'll be telling you what homework assignments are due in advance. At least study a couple hours a day. He said, I think 15 hours a week. That averages out to about the same thing. Study groups are important. And we talked about the book. That's what it looks like. Oh, by the way, don't ignore the back of the book. There's some valuable sections back there. There's a glossary that has the definitions in it. So those words, those terms that I showed you in the front of a chapter, you can make a list, make your own flashcards, and just say, hey, what's the definition of these things? Turn to the back of the book, and there it is, all of those definitions. You don't have to see them in the chapter. You can see them in the back of the book glossary section. What I've got here is, let me flip over. I showed you my old version, number 9, 9th edition, because that's the one I marked up more. But here's the glossary in the back. There we go. And there it is. Just for every term, there's a definition, easy to find real quick. Or if you're studying or reviewing later, and you don't want to look up the chapter and try to remember what chapter that term was from, just look it up in the glossary. Get familiar with this glossary with every chapter as you read through it. And then also after the glossary is another way that you can find material real quick, the index. Who's having flashbacks of high school and college? Yep. All these big fat books have these things. And here you go. Joint tenancy. It's mentioned 3 times on 3 different pages. Joint tenancy, you can find it in page 36, 39, and 45. Just quick. It's all about getting to that information fast. There is the license law and commission rules appendix A in this book, and I'm going to tell you not to use it. I don't want you to go by this version. I'm going to give you PDFs of this because while this book does not come out nice and fresh and new every year, the license law and commission rules does. Who puts that out, do you think? Who do you think puts out the license law and commission rules of real estate?
Real Estate Commission.
The commission. Thank you, sir. So therefore, they publish it every year. You can find it free on the commission website, by the way. So back when this book was published, they put that year's version in there, but some stuff might not be right anymore. So let's just eliminate that possibility and go off of the PDF. I'm going to send you that. I'm going to put it in the Google Classroom for you. What else? Oh, there's a math review. You math phobes out there, and that's okay. I've been one too in the past. Still am for some kind of math, but I kind of have the real estate stuff down pretty solid. But don't ask me calculus. You don't need any calculus for real estate. But there is a math appendix back here that will get you up to speed. What do you need to know besides that little bit of 2 times 3 equals 6? You need to know how to convert decimals to percentages back and forth. You could certainly use your calculator to do that, but you need to understand the relationship. And a little bit of shapes for like lot sizes. Here's the section 3 is the appendix on fractions and decimals and percentages. Get up to speed with this. Go through this week, right? Go through that. If math is an issue, go through that this week. Get up to speed on it. And then ask me, right? In the chat, by the way, you can chat directly to me without everybody seeing it. At the bottom of the chat, it says a blue box called Everyone. You can click on that and pick my name, and then I'm the only one that's going to see it. feel free to ask me a private question. If you don't want to say it in front of everybody, and I will not call you out. I promise. I won't say, so-and-so asked this. If I see that it's a private chat to me, I'll say, someone asked this question. Because if you have that question, odds are they do too. Someone else does too. So feel free to use that, public or private chat. We come back from break, we'll talk more about this slide. This is the gist of the different resources that you have available to you. There's some more stuff too, but these are the big chunks. So we'll talk about those chunks in 10 minutes. I'll see you in a little while. the big chunks. Here is what you're dealing with. The syllabus, Jason already touched on, and that is your best friend. Syllabus is number one. That's because the entity who wrote the exam is the one who wrote the syllabus. The Real Estate Commission gave us the syllabus. It is the Real Estate Commission who writes the PSI exam. Now, your end of class exam is something we give you, but we hopefully write it in the spirit of the Real Estate Commission. We're trying to prepare you for that PSI exam. Therefore, our class exam, we want to emulate it as close as we possibly can. So the syllabus, though, your best friend, get to know it before every session, before every chapter you read the syllabus first, right? Going to talk about chapter 13, read the syllabus that corresponds with chapter, or I should say unit 13 in the book. Now, here's a warning. This will be I will help you when I give you the study guide. That's why I'm going to give you the study guide. Sadly, I'm sorry to report that the order of the syllabus is not the same as the order in the textbook. It is for the most part, but it strays a little bit. Sometimes the syllabus section 21, for instance, is not the same as chapter or unit 21 in the book. The syllabus section 21 is about license law and commission rule. Your textbook chapter or unit 21 is about closing the transaction. So I'm going to give you that warning. I'm going to give you a study guide to help you stay on top of those things. What chapter in the book versus what section in the syllabus? Next one over in green is the license law and commission rules, LLCR. By the way, can you see this clearly? Is it blurry or you? Oh, okay, good. Okay, and when I was sharing stuff from the website, internet stuff earlier, could you see that clearly or was that blurry for you? Okay, good. Jason apparently was showing up blurry for him. Okay.
It was blurry.
It was blurry for you? Okay. All right, it seems weird. I guess for some, not others. I need to figure out why. Okay, that license law and commission rules. If you order the book, you can get this from the Real Estate Commission. Let me pull that up, by the way. Find my cursor. Sometimes that cursor runs away from you. Yeah, there we go. Okay, it's free if it's the online PDF, and I will send you the PDFs. I'll just post them to the Google Drive so you don't have to track it down yourself. But you could also buy it. If you want to have a nice printed out book version, here's where you would find it. You could go to ncrec.gov. That's the Real Estate Commission website. I'll put it in the chat. ncrec.gov. It's a government entity, so .gov. If you go there and then click on resources, I believe, was that right? No, publications. Click on publications. A little drop down is also another publications, and then commission information. You can actually buy, I think they charge you. No, they don't. They don't charge you. That's right. It's free. So you could just go on here and order this for free, and it'll be a nice, I don't have it close by, but it's a stapled version already printed out, because I think there's value in having it printed out. Because then you can move it around, highlight things, write things. If you don't get it from the Real Estate Commission, have it printed out yourself, or take it to Kinko's or UPS or whatever's still open and out there. Get it in writing. Get it printed. We give you the PDF. I'll give you that. Now, this book. Oh, hang on a second. I'm mixing things up. This is the Relink book. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. Okay. The License Law and Commission Rule book does cost $6.50, but it's probably worth it. You'd probably pay more to print the whole thing out. So that is going to give you a way to actually write things and mark things up. And it's going to be the most recent version from July of 2022. So there's that. Within this License Law and Commission Rules book. Yeah, you're right. That's right, Rebecca. It doesn't all change yearly, but it does come out fresh on a more frequent basis than the textbook. Let me just say that. I think it's yearly, but it's definitely more frequently than the textbook. So that's what LLCR is. Within that book, there are several sections. You need to be familiar with 3 of them. 3 of those sections. The first part of that book is the license law stuff. And let me tell you about it, and then I'll show it to you. The first part of the book, write it down in your notes. The first part, license law, and write 93A. Anytime you see the number 93A, it's something to do with a license law, a North Carolina real estate license law. It's under the category 93A in the general statutes of North Carolina, right? The general statutes where every law is. If you just type in GS, North Carolina GS, and a number, it'll show you the general statute for whatever that is. It could be any kind of law about anything. But the North Carolina real estate ones are 93A. GS 93A, General Statute 93A, is the section about real estate laws. And that is what is in this book. In the middle of this book is the commission rules. What are the rules? Not laws, but commission rules. You'll know it's a commission rule because you'll see the number 58 in front of it. You will never be tested about the numbers, though. I'm just telling you for point of reference. But don't worry, they'll never ask you, which rule talks about how you can't break any rules? 93A-6CZ4. It's never going to be that. You just need to know what the rules are, not where they're located. But you do need to go see them. And then the third and probably the most important part of this book, because it's a good guide for you, is at the very back of the book. I think it starts around page 86, and it's called the comments section. The comments section. So think of this book as 3 parts: license law, which is 93A, commission rules, which is 58A, and comments. I will talk about the comments section a lot, and I will post all 3 of these as individual PDFs for you in the Google Drive folder, which is in the Notion. That's how you'll find it, and it'll all make sense when you see it. So you'll see, I would say you don't necessarily need to print out the license law or the commission rules one, but I would definitely print out the 30-page PDF of the comments section, because that comments section is written a little less lawyerly, a little easier to digest. But the Real Estate Commission did just put out a little notice to us this year, and they said, hey, don't be preaching the comments section only. Don't tell people that all they need to do is study that. They need to also look at the license law and commission rules. But the comments section is sort of like, it's like the small version of the syllabus. It's to the license law and commission rules material what the syllabus is to the whole course, if that makes sense. So it kind of gives you it all in easy to digestible examples. It'll say the broker did this. They didn't tell the seller that they might want to be the buyer, so they put themselves ahead of the client, and they're guilty of self-dealing or something called negligent misrepresentation, willful misrepresentation. They go into examples of all that good stuff. And I'll show it to you in a moment, and you'll see how it's linked over to those other sections, the license law section and the commission rules section. Obviously, we have our textbook. We kind of examined that already. And then the other thing from the commission is the process, the book about the process. And that is available for free. That's the first thing I showed you a minute ago. And that's called the Relink book. When I tell you it's in the Relink book, it's because the Relink book is all about the process of taking this course and then testing and then applying for your license. And then what you also have to do as part of this process is get your background search done. Not just via any place. You've got to go to a specific website that they tell you to in the Relink book. It says, here's the web address to go order your background search. You don't need to do that tonight or this week even. Probably okay to just do that around the midpoint of the class. Like, what is it? About a 10-week class. So in about a month and a half, around the midterm exam, I will give you a heads up. Hey, by the way, you might want to go ahead and order your background search. Why? Because it might take longer for you and yours. They're not always the same amount of time. What does it depend on? How long might it take? Depends on how many places you've lived and how many names you've had. right? Maybe you were a military brat. You lived in 15 different places. Maybe you were in the military yourself for any reason. You just lived in a lot of places. They have a lot of places to check out. And that might also mean that it costs more. The more places they have to check out, the more it's going to cost. Somebody that grew up here and never left here might, I think you'd still be okay, Gregor, even if you start around the midterm, but you certainly wouldn't want to, 10 different places in 10 years. You wouldn't want to expect to get that back in time to take the PSI if you waited till the final exam was done in this course. I'd go ahead and start around that gives you enough time. But that background search is good for 180 days. Keep that in mind. When the results of that background check come back, and let's just say maybe you pass one part of the exam, but not the other. And so you wait a while and then you retake and you eventually pass, that clock is ticking. So you might have to get a new background search done if by the time you finally pass the last attempt is more than 180 days from when you originally ordered it. That's why I would say still okay to wait a little bit. I've seen them cost about $20. I've heard of them costing closer to 80 or 90 bucks. Just depends on how elaborate things are. Occasionally I'll get a student who will ask me privately. They'll be like, well, there was this kind of a big thing that I got in trouble for a while back, and I'm kind of worried that I might not get my license because of it. And if there's some big, bad, shadowy thing that happened in the past, there's a way that you can make sure that you're not wasting your time. And that is called a petition for predetermination. You could actually go to the Real Estate Commission website. You could pay them $45. You basically say, here's what happened. I stole a hot air balloon and threw live turkeys out from it, and whatever it was, right? And I'm worried that you might not give me a license, and I don't want to take this whole class only to find out that you're not going to give me a license because I got arrested when I was 21. If that's the situation, get a petition for predetermination for $45. You basically tell them the story, and they'll tell you now if it's worth your trouble, essentially. And I hear that from time to time. It's not unusual or crazy. One student recently said, my husband wants to join me in the business, but he basically is a convicted felon. He got arrested for, I don't know, remember if she told me what it was. And is it even worth him trying because of the background check? And I told her about this petition for predetermination. So Lilium, the syllabus was, okay, yeah, that would be in the orientation email, but I will put it also in the Google Drive just so you have access to it anytime you need it. But that should have been sent to you as an email attachment. Okay, we're good on the chat. Okay. So the Relink book, we're going to look at that PDF here in a moment. But again, it is about the procedure, the process, and the exam details. What does it take to pass? How many questions will there be? How many questions are coming from different topics from the syllabus? What? Yeah, a chart that tells how many questions are coming from the various topics. That could be useful. It's on pages 16 and 17 in the Relink book. So that's a good resource. That's available to get printed and sent to you by the commission for free if you want, or you could just print that out. It's not as many pages as the comments section. And there is some testable material in that Relink book. So let's talk about the Relink book. The process to get your license. That's what it is. This is the go-to guide. Feel free to ask me questions, but sometimes I'll say, you know what? Good question. I can't quite remember. Let's look in the Relink book. So check that first. You'll save us both some time. I'm always happy to answer your questions, but the Relink book has the process laid out. Got to have that criminal background check. It's referenced on should be around page 10 of this Relink book. There's a website you go to and order it from. Can't just be any old background search website. And what will happen is they'll do the search, and when they finish it, they'll send you the report to the email you've given them, and they will also send the report to the Real Estate Commission. And the Real Estate Commission will receive it, and they'll say, have they tested yet? No? Okay, that's nice. Don't care. And they'll put it on the shelf until you finish the class, exam, pass the class exam, and apply to the real estate commission to try to get your license. It costs $100 to apply for your license with the commission. And then the commission will say, oh, you want to get your license? Okay, well, then let us tell PSI that they can test you now. They're going to make sure first that your background search is in. Okay, yeah, we got the background search. Yeah, go ahead, take the PSI. And you're going to have to pay PSI, I think it's around $56 to take the test. And so $156 for applying to the commission and taking the test through PSI. Now, you'll either take that PSI exam online, that's one of the options, or you'll go there to their testing facility. They have lots of testing facilities. The one in Charlotte is off Tyvola Road. But if you're in, you guys are spread out, a lot of you are in the Triangle, there's PSI testing facilities everywhere. Find the one closest to you, schedule it with them. You go there and they're very strict. They make you comply with every single rule. Whoever's running those shows, you can't bring in, if you do bring in like your cell phone and stuff like that, they make you put it all in a bundle and set it in another room. You can't just have it with you. So they'll give you a detailed list of the rules of what you can bring in and not. And you'll sit for the national portion of the exam first. And they give you 2.5 hours to take the national section of the exam. Once those 2.5 hours are done, whether you've completed the exam or not, the 2.5 hours expires. Now you're done with that. Now you take the state portion of the exam. Yes, they allow bathroom breaks, but they're going to be real careful that they're not going to let whole groups go together. They're going to be real attentive about that. But the national section first, 2.5 hours, and then the state section for 1.5 hours. So 4 hours worth of exam time. Whether you're doing it from your home computer or you're sitting there in the testing center, you're doing it on a computer in both situations. It's not like pen and paper if you go there. So you're sitting in front of a computer workstation. And a little tip, I'll give you some tips along the way, but they let you skip questions and it'll just roll it to the end of the exam. You come back around to it. Use that feature. Every question is worth the same amount of points. And some questions for you are going to be harder than others. The math people the non-math people might be like, oh no, I got to do like a calculation where there's 3 calculations in order to get the one final answer. I don't even want to think about this, skip. Let me do all the other stuff. Come back around to what I call the monster math question. I make it sound worse than it really is, but you really have to do 3 or 4 calculations within the question in order to find the final answer. There's only 1 or 2 like that in the whole exam. In fact, there's only 8 calculation questions on the PSI, 8 of them. But guess what? They figured out how to ask you math questions without it being a calculation question. They do the calculation part for you, but they need you to tell them who's paying for it. The prorated taxes for the seller is $1,300 and for the buyer it's $700. But how do we count it on the closing statement? Is it a debit to the seller for $1,300 and a credit to the buyer, or is it this or this or this? So they take the calculation element out of it and then just ask you the procedure or who pays for what. So there's that possibility. But 8 actual calculating related questions, if that makes you feel better. But feel free to skip them and put them to the end. Come back around to them. How many questions on the exam? At least 80 for the national section, at least 40 for the state. Why do I say that? Because the Real Estate Commission is always working on the exam. They're always modifying and adding new questions. They're not requiring you to answer more questions, but they put in sample questions, I should say. In other words, some of the questions you might be answering aren't counting toward your grade. They're also not counting against your time, but they're a way for you to test out how hard questions are so the commissions can say, should we add this question to the next round of tests? There's multiple versions of the test, by the way. If you go into that online center and maybe there's 50 people in the room, you don't all have the same question or the same test. You might have 4 different versions in that room showing up on those screens. So you could go out in the waiting room. They don't want you to, and they would not be allowed. You get in trouble if you did it. But if you went outside of the test and started talking to people and say, what'd you get for number 37? The commission finds that out, they're going to have a problem with that. But if you did that, their 37 might not be your 37. They use different versions, and they're testing new test questions. So 80 plus questions on the national means some of those questions, maybe 3 or 4 of them, are going to just be, hey, let's see if this is a good one to roll into the future version of the test. Again, it doesn't count against your grade. It might be really hard, and maybe they find out that nobody can get it, and they'll be like, oh, we need to adjust this a little bit, make it a little more reasonable. Or it might be too easy and everybody gets it, and they're like, no, we need to make this harder. Same for the state. They're going to throw a couple extra questions in there, but they don't count against you. You won't know which ones are which, by the way. And we talked about this. How should you allocate study time? Follow the syllabus, and then follow pages 16 and 17 in the Relink book, because that shows you the breakdown, and I'll share that with you here in a moment. What do you need in order to pass the PSI exam? You've got to answer 57 questions on the national correctly. That is a 71%. And on the state portion, it's a 72.5%. It's just the way the numbers kind of work out. By the way, the class exam, in order to even sit for the PSI, the class exam requires a 75% or better. 75 or better to pass the class exam in order to go on and take the PSI. These are the numbers for the PSI exam. How long does it take? Oh, sorry, it was 2 hours. Let me double check that. For the national and 1.5 for the state. And then after you get your application approved, you have 180 days to take the exam. It would be a bad idea to wait 180 days, 170 days, because you're going to forget everything. But that includes retesting. So here's how it works. You paid $156 to take the full PSI, including the national and the state. And let's say everything goes great on the national, but you missed the state by a couple of questions and you don't quite pass that one. In order to retake it, you have to pay another $156. However, you only have to retake the one you failed. You're only retaking the state, not the national. But you're still paying the $156. But again, I've heard of some people trying this thing 3 or 4 or 5 times, and that's okay. Every time you're probably going to do better. The experience of taking the exam, besides the part that sucks, which is that you pay $156 each, is going to be sort of an exercise in getting you better at it anyway, right? So don't just let that devastate you in the off chance that it happens. Once you complete this course and pass the final exam for this course, it's good for 3 years. You can use this to satisfy the education requirement to apply for your license for as many as 3 years. Obviously, if you waited maybe life changed. You finished this exam, you passed this course exam, and then you get this maybe job promotion. You're like, well, gosh, this is too good to be true. I do want to try real estate, but this job is right here in my lap. Let me do this for a minute. And maybe you do it for a year. And then you're like, you know what? I really want to go back and do that real estate thing. You don't have to sit through the course because you passed it. And it's good for 3 years. Now, you're probably going to want to take a refresher, some sort of a cram course probably, but it is good for 3 years once you pass the final exam. The steps are outlined in the Relink book. You're basically completing the course, you're applying to the commission, and then you're setting up your exam with the PSI. And then once you've passed the PSI exam, they tell the real estate commission, and the real estate commission then looks at your criminal background report, make sure that it's also called a character report. They're just looking to make sure all that is in line because, we're handling people's sensitive documents. We're handling their money. In that one case of due diligence money, we're handling a $400,000 check. I've never done that, but they're big checks, right? And we need to pass a certain level of ethics and character in order to be trusted with that. Another helpful hint that I've mentioned once, since the commission wrote the syllabus, use it to make a review guide. Let's look at the syllabus. Let me flip over and look at the syllabus. I'll show you that. All righty, here we go. Let's make that a little bigger. Okay. So syllabus is this. Here's what it looks like. you'll have that again in your Google Drive. You also got it in your email. It's the October 21 edition. As we flip on down, read the intro, get familiar with what this syllabus consists of. It's got the topics of the course, obviously. It references the commission rules of 58 different letters, but they start with 58. The commission requires the course to at least be 75 hours. We've bumped it. Most schools that I know of have require more because we as a school have the right to do that. It takes more. It takes a lot of prep to be successful here. This is just a little section that talks about what we as instructors are required to do, use different aids and whatnot. And then let me get on down here. Level 1, level 2, and level 3. I'll mention the levels of the material, and they're mentioned in the syllabus. What do they mean? They don't mean that level 1 is less important. It just means that if it's a level 1 item, all you really need to know is what it means. What's the definition of the word, right? Just recall basic concepts and facts. You don't have to go into depth, into great detail. And then level 2 is a little more detail. Use information to draw connections between ideas. That's a little more than just knowing the definition. And then level 3 is the deepest level here, and that is, hey, be able to critique, judge, defend a position. All the math falls within level 3 because you've got to interact with it and know the ins and outs there. So just be aware, be watching for levels 1, 2, and 3, and they reference it in the syllabus. Don't worry about my highlighted parts here. I don't even remember why. I know now. Here's the sections of the syllabus and their topics, and then the number of hours the commission thinks that we should be covering it in class. So when we get to chapter 1 tomorrow, or section 1 is basic real estate concepts. Essentially, what is real estate? What is personal property versus fixtures, stuff like that. The commission says, you know what? You need to spend about 45 minutes on this in class. And then obviously the next week, we're going to get into chapter 2, and that's a much bigger chapter. Chapter or section 2 in the syllabus, which happens to be unit 2 in the book. 4.5 hours when we're expected to spend on this in class. It's going to basically take all of next Wednesday. Chapter 2 will take all of next Wednesday. And then chapter 3 or syllabus section 3 is about taxation and how to calculate taxes. It's only about an hour and a half. So you can kind of look down through here and see I've highlighted the ones that are the biggest chunks of time. Down here, brokerage relationships. That's how we represent people. And since the commission is there to protect consumers, you better believe this is an important focus. 12.5 hours worth between sections 7 and 8, which also happen to be units 7 and 8 in your textbook. They just so happen to be the same this time. Contracts are next. That's 7.5 hours of material. That's and then finance is another big one. So what you see here is the first couple of weeks are mostly small chapters, except for this chapter 2. And then the center portion of the course is a lot of big, heavy. This is like a Big Mac. These are the 2 patties, right? This is the meat of the course. Then there's another little batch right after we get done with those big chunks of just small courses, small little topics like construction, property management, landlord tenant is only a couple hours. And then the last big one that I'm going to spread out over our time together is real estate license law and commission rule, which we will talk about some tonight and again tomorrow, more of it tomorrow. And then I'm going to stay on top of things with you guys and remind you, and I'm just going to be saying, you should be reading that comment section. It's the 30-page PDF, license law, commission rules comment section. You should have read that thing by the time these 11 weeks are over at least 5 times, if not 10 times. You need to get sick of it because so much of it is what's going to be on the exam. It's essentially the state portion of the exam. It also crosses over with a lot of the agency chapters too. So and if you look at the breakdown of who passes which parts, more people struggle with the state portion of the exam than they do the national. And so if you get real good with license law and commission rules from the beginning, you're going to have a better shot. It would be a mistake to wait until the end of the course when it falls in line with the syllabus before you even touch this. So I kind of make you cover it a lot earlier. And I'm going to divide the this section of the syllabus. I'm going to divide it into like portions of the time together. The first quarter of our time together, you should have covered this much of the syllabus about license law and commission rules. By the halfway point, you should have covered this much more. And by the 3/4 point, this much more. That's how important this is. So the total of 75 hours. And then here's how it looks. Section 1 happens to be chapter 1 or unit 1 in the textbook. It's a 45-minute portion, and it's all level 1. It's all just the words. So what you could do to prepare for tomorrow is look up the definition of land and real estate and real property and personal property and have a printed out syllabus and write it in here. Write it in to the margins, and sometimes they give you good bit of space here to do that. Other times they go ahead and give you the definitions of things on some sections of the syllabus, but interact with it. Make it a review guide for yourself from day one. By the time we're finished around week 8 or 9, most of the syllabus will be filled in because you would have done this. Then the thing to do at that point is to print out a new version that's nice and crispy clean and empty and see how much of it you can recreate by yourself from memory, right? That's proactive learning. Don't just read back through what you filled in. Make yourself fill it in again and then struggle with it and be like, oh gosh, what's the difference between real estate, real property? I can't remember. Then only after you struggle and put yourself through a little bit of difficulty, then go look it up. Look at your completed syllabus and compare it to the empty syllabus. Go section by section and try to think of as much of it as you possibly can out of your own head. That's going to benefit you the most. So obviously a lot of terms here in chapter 1. I'm going to say chapter a lot. I can't get it out of my head. I'm sorry. Unit 1. Unit 2, which also happens to be section 2 here in the syllabus. 4.5 hours. A lot of weird words here. This is the part where people are like, oh my gosh, that was the worst ever. Because it's a lot of legalese terms. And here's the good news. Once you get through this class and get your license, you'll probably never have to really know what riparian rights are ever again unless you work near the coast or near the lake, because it's water rights. So a lot of the stuff that you learn for the purpose of getting your exam, your license, isn't really what you need to know on the daily. And if you ran into a riparian or a literal rights situation, you're probably going to point them in the direction of an attorney. A lot of the stuff that we have to learn in pre-licensing in real life on the street, we're going to say, you know what? I can't give you legal advice. Let's talk to an attorney about it. So maybe that'll make you feel better. Sadly, you've got to learn it now, but you don't really have to interact with a lot of this stuff on the daily in real life. Fixtures is a level 3 though in chapter 2. That's all about, hey, what can I take with me? Right? You're all sitting somewhere in your house and you are sitting amongst a combination of both personal property and real property. Real property is things attached to real estate. If it's real property, it's a fixture. So that little wall hanging behind Matthew there, those little hexagon thingies, they're probably hanging on nails. He could probably lift it off. That's personal property. But if I'm wrong, and in fact they are screwed into the wall and he needs a screwdriver to remove them, that's a fixture. You better believe that's a common on the daily problem in transactions. He was supposed to leave those 3 little doodads because they're screwed into the wall, but he decided he wanted to take them. The buyer knows they're a fixture, but the buyer shows up for the walkthrough and they're gone. We've got some fixture trouble. We've got some people who are mad. So the difference between personal property and fixtures is one of the things that is a very common occurrence in the actual practice of real estate. We're going to learn all about that in chapter 2, unit 2. Let me flip on down to all the way down to section 21. That is license law and commission rule. That one is a little more filled in. Doesn't have all these white spaces to take notes. And that's good because I mean, it's some detailed stuff here. Here we go. So section 21, license law commission rule, there it is. 8 hours. We're going to be spending 8 hours of time. And it starts with what are definitions? What's a provisional broker? You already know that. A provisional broker is somebody who is not yet a full broker, somebody who still has to take post-licensing classes. That's the only thing. That's the only thing, right? When you get your license, you'll be a provisional broker, and you are required to no longer be a provisional broker not later than 18 months from your initial licensure. Do you have to be activated in order to do the business? Yes. But do you have to be activated? Do you have to have an active provisional license in order to take the post-licensing courses? No. I've had plenty of post-licensing students that never have sold a house, can't even do so because they're not an active status person. They just decided, let's go ahead and get the post out of the way before we activate our license, and that's okay. The 18-month clock is still ticking. It started ticking when you were given a license, even though it was an inactive provisional license, right? So all that good stuff is what we're dealing with here in section 21. And you'll notice talks about level 2 is requirements for a license. Level 1 are the categories, just know the definitions. And you can kind of see they've got some of the stuff filled in. What are some exemptions? When can you do real estate without a license? Well, these, I think they add up to about 10 circumstances where you can do real estate without a license if you're an attorney, or if you have power of attorney for somebody. Basically, you can sell your own house without a license, and if you have power of attorney for someone else, that's basically like you're selling your own house, right? We'll get more into that. Who's on the commission? Those 9 commission members I showed you pictures of. And then here's what I wanted to point out. In this section, hot links. The blue things are links. So I would definitely print out the syllabus, but I would also use this online version. Because if you use this online version and you want to see, oh, there's a commission rule, 58A 0504. We're looking at number 4 here. A commission rule about active versus inactive license. Let's see what that is. Click on it. And let me flip over. What just happened on my other screen when I did that was this. Oh, good. It showed up. It took you straight there with a Google search. It was just a link straight to the general statute, straight to the commission rule, whatever the case may be, active versus inactive license status. It's a quick way to look up you don't have to look at the license law PDF that I'm going to send you, or the commission rules PDF. I'll give it to you so you could look it up, but you could just click on the little hot link there and go straight to it. Probably save you some time. Okay. Are we back on the syllabus? Okay, good. So you'll see that a commission rule is a 58 thing, and then a license law is a 93 thing. Anything referred that way. And yeah, that's about it. I just wanted to point that out here in the license law commission rules section. Now, again, there are 3 sections of that license law commission rule book, the license laws, the commission rules, but then also the comments. I'm going to be sending you the link to the Google Drive after class. I'll get you all that. I'm going to first send you an email so that you can join Notion. You'll have to join it through the email link that I send you. Once you have access to Notion, you'll have access to the Google Drive with all these things that I'm talking about. The comment section. The 30-page or so document, back of the entire book that you should get real familiar with. That, you can read that whole comment section, and it's going to be most of what you need to know for the test, except one thing. The one part that's not covered in the comment section is in section C right here. So write this down. Section 21 of the syllabus, subsection C. C as in Charlie. These 10 items under C that you're looking at right here are not found in the comments section, the comments PDF. I'm going to show you that comments PDF in a minute, but you won't find any of these 10 things in that. So if you know the comments section upside down and backwards because you've read it 10 times, that's not enough. You're also going to need to know these 10 things from this syllabus section too, as well. From this syllabus section as well. Good news is they're the most basic thing. They're the super basic. You'll learn them just by osmosis almost. Licensing of an individual. What do you have to be to have your real estate license? 18, sane and sober. Good luck. I have questions, but no. You have to be at least 18, sane. Talks about provisional, talks about pre and post licensing. What happens if you don't do your education? You go inactive. I'm just kind of riffing at this point. You don't need to take notes right now. We'll cover this quite extensively. And then your license expires if you don't pay the $45 renewal fee. So if you don't pay the money, it's called expired. If you don't do the education, it's called inactive. So your license could be inactive but not expired. You paid the money, but you didn't do the education, or the opposite. You could have done the education, but you didn't pay the money. You're active but expired, right? I think I said that in the right direction. Continuing education, we've already kind of talked about that once. It's 2 4-hour classes, a total of 8. None of your continuing education time counts toward your post requirement, or vice versa. What's the difference between active and inactive? Well, if you have an active license, you can do real estate for other people for compensation. What does it take? What do you need a license for? That's it. Real estate for somebody else, not yourself, for something of value. That is it. A 3-part test. And that can be confusing. They'll try to throw you some curveballs by talking about your grandma or your parents. So a classic one is grandma owns a duplex. She lets you live in one side of it. In exchange, you have to manage the other side for her, find tenants and collect the rent for her. She doesn't charge you any rent. She lets you live there rent free. Do you need a real estate license for this arrangement with grandma? You're living in one side of the duplex. You're the property manager for the other side. She's letting you live there rent free. She's your grandma. Do you need a real estate license? Well, does it pass the 3-part test? Are you doing real estate? Yes, you're being a property manager. But are you doing it for yourself or for someone else? For someone else. Even though it's your grandma, she's still someone else. And then finally, are you doing it for something of value? In this market, I'd say free rent is something of value. In any market, but even now, right? Rent is what? Free rent includes, that's something of value as well. So yeah, you would need a license for this situation. What if you owned the duplex though? You owned the duplex, not grandma, it's you. You live in one side, you rent out the other. You don't need a license because it's yours. You're not doing it for someone else, you're doing it for yourself. That's the difference. And you can get kind of sidetracked depending on what kind of, they're going to write out a narrative on the test question, say, here's the situation. You're going to have to read this paragraph and then see what they're asking at the bottom and see what those 4, they're all multiple choice, by the way. They're all multiple choice, and they're not going to pull that nonsense about Roman numeral 1 is this and 2 is that. And is it 1 or 2 or both or neither? They don't do that anymore. It's just going to be 4 choices. Which one is it? Multiple choice. And in most cases, you can probably weed out at least 1, maybe 2 of the answers of just because they're nonsense. Not crazy nonsense, but if you know what you're doing, you can probably weed out a couple of them and increase your chances. Okay, so the rest of this one is just super basic. If you change your name, you've got to tell the commission within what amount of time? 10 days. If you change your name or address, they've got to know. And if you have a criminal conviction, you have to tell the real estate commission. Within what amount of time? 60 days. You got 60 days to tell the commission that you were convicted of a crime. So quick review question. How long do you have to tell the commission if you're accused of a crime? Tell me in the chat. Who caught it? Who hates me right now? Let me ask it again. How many days do you have to tell the commission if you are accused of a crime? Not convicted. It's only convictions. Yeah, I slipped that in. The accused, and they'll do that too. Accused or what was another word they use? unless they tell you you were convicted, then the 60 days doesn't apply. 60 days upon a conviction, not an accusation, not even an arrest. They might throw, that's what it is. They might say, how many days do you have to tell the commission once you are arrested for a crime? And you better believe they'll put in either that you don't, or 10 days or 60 days or 45 days, something like that. Arrest doesn't count. It's the conviction that counts. That's the kind of thing you just need to look out for. Okay, you see here, I wrote in these words, and I think I'll post this version of the syllabus for you, but I'm going to try to cover within our first portion of the time together this amount of the License Law Commission Rules section all the way up to about here. We're going to have covered this week. Then the next section would involve, see, this is level 3. Level 3 in the License Law Commission Rules involves what we could be found guilty of. Remember that disciplinary section of the bulletin? We might have seen some of those words, misrepresentation and reprimand, and misrepresentation or omission of a material fact. It goes into great detail about all the things that we do wrong, things that we could get in trouble for. That's a pretty big one that some sizable test questions could come from. Okay, syllabus. Let's keep going. Here's the Relink book, Real Estate Licensing in North Carolina. What does it talk about? Relink book is about the what? The license law or the process? You got it. The process. Let's look at some important parts here. There's a nice handy table of contents. What do you need in order to have a license? We talked about that. Talks about the difference between provisional and, by the way, on the exam, this could be a little mental hurdle for you. If they're talking about a provisional broker, basically a new person, a person who hasn't had their license very long, they can't have had their license any more than 18 months if they're a provisional, because they only have 18 months to complete the post-licensing classes, and that's how they remove their provisional status, right? So what's the difference? They go into that, something called BIC eligible, broker in charge eligible status versus an actual broker in charge. You could be broker in charge eligible and never become the broker in charge. You do the same things for both. You'd have to take a course, and that's it. And then you have to take a certain kind of CE. One of those CE courses has to be a BIC update instead of the general update. And that's it. I would suggest most people to get their BIC eligible status, because why? I had a post-licensing student one time, and I was talking to him about this stuff, and she came at a break and she said, oh my gosh, I just realized my little firm out in the eastern part of Cabarrus County, there's just 10 of us. 10 of us that work in our firm under the broker in charge. All 10 of us are provisional brokers. What happens if her broker in charge forgets to do her continuing education by June 10th, which is the deadline? Well, on July 1st, that broker in charge is going to have an inactive broker's license, and all 10 of those provisional brokers are out of business. They also have inactive licenses. So my little post-licensing student said, I'm going to hurry up and get the rest of my post-license classes done so that as soon as I can get my experience reached, I've got to have 2 years of experience to be a BIC or BIC eligible. Then I'll become BIC eligible. That way, if our broker in charge ever needs to take a break or screws up and doesn't take her education, she can just hand off the baton of being broker in charge to me while she clears up her mess. Every firm should have at least one broker in charge eligible person. It's going to be a full broker, a non-provisional broker who has sat through the 12-hour course. It's a separate course given by the commission. And it's just smart, because even brokers in charge can get so busy they forget to do their CE. They might have signed up for it online, but they forgot to actually take the class, and here it is, June 11th, and they wake up, oh my gosh, I forgot to do it. By the way, the CE deadline is June 10th every year. When is continuing education due? Write it down, June 10th. What happens if you don't do your CE by June 10th? Your license goes inactive, but it does not go inactive the very next day. The beginning of the license year is July 1st every year. So if you forget to do your CE by June 10th, you're still active for another 20 days. Your license will definitely go inactive, though, as of July 1st. Right? You with me? Testable. So you forget to do your CE by June 10th, what happens to your license on June 11th? Nothing. It's still active. What's going to happen to it? Absolutely, you can't do a thing about it on July 1st. It will go inactive. Nothing you can do about it. Now, the Real Estate Commission will not allow us schools, us educators, to even offer continuing education classes between the 11th and the 30th of June. They need a break. They need time to kind of catch their breath, cycle through everybody, make sure everybody's counted. That's not even an option. That's why you're absolutely going to become inactive on July 1st. So when you take a CE class in the month of July, everybody in the class kind of looks funny. They kind of have a deer in the headlights expression because they're like, it's probably because they lost their license, right? They went inactive. They need to hurry up. Will they get it back in a day? No. They might get lucky enough to get a class on July 1st, but it's going to probably take a few days to get all that processed. Even though they take the 4-hour class on that one day, the school has 10 days to report it. I would hope the school would be nice and hurry up and report it sooner than later, and they probably would. But if it's a broker in charge that went inactive, they're not done. They would have to go through and make up the CE. Then they've lost their broker in charge status. What happens if you if you go inactive as a broker in charge? You can reactivate your license, but now you've got to go back through that course again. And it's not offered like every day. It's going to take some time to get back up and running. That's how important this BIC eligible status is, and it's good to have somebody in. So June 11th rolls around, you're the BIC, and you realize, oh, crap, I forgot. I'm going to be inactive on July 1st, and so are 300 of my provisional brokers. Oh, I guess I'm going to need to turn it over and make a broker in charge out of Larry. Larry is BIC eligible. I'll just let him do it. And then they would go online to the Real Estate Commission website, type it in and say, Larry is now the broker in charge of this firm. And now they're okay. Now all those provisionals, by the way, there are some firms that have 200 and 300 provisional brokers within them. That broker in charge is responsible for 300 people to a greater degree than just every other experienced broker. I'm waiting for the commission to implement a rule about that because right now there is not one. You could have a firm where that BIC is responsible for a couple of hundred provisional brokers. Most of them are not. Most of them it's just maybe a one or a dozen or so. Okay, we're making our way through the Relink book. Let's fast forward to page 16. By the way, let's see, here it is. Here's the background check information. It's right there on page 10. Page 10 of the Relink PDF. And you'll go to this website and submit for your background search. But here's the other important part about this. It tells you some ideas gives you an idea for what the questions look like. What's the format of them? That's kind of useful. But here is the chart. Use this. Look down through it, and you'll see that the first couple of chapters we're going to talk about, units, sections of the syllabus, I should say, because these numbers here are referencing sections of the syllabus. The basic concepts that we're going to talk about tomorrow, property insurance that we'll talk about in about 8 weeks, construction is about 8 weeks from now, investment is a while. All 4 of these sections of the syllabus only account for 3 total possible questions on the whole exam. 2 on the national, 1 on the state. So if you only have a limited amount of time to study, are you going to study basic construction or are you going to study brokerage relationships, laws, and practice? You better believe it. You're going to prioritize, go from the top down, go from the double digits down. Make sure you have brokerage stuff down pat, contract stuff down pat, because that's a total of 15 questions between the national and the state. The brokerage stuff is 21 questions between the two. Basic contract law is all under national, and that's 13 of them. Finance is 12 on the national portion. And then the other page has the rest of these things. Landlord, tenant, property management, rental stuff is a total of 4 questions, even though that's probably about a 3-hour commitment to class time. And then license law, there it is. License law and commission rules, 10 questions out of 40 on the state portion of the exam. It's coming from license law and commission rule. And then you can see here in math falls under the national section. That's actual calculation questions. There are going to be more math questions. You just won't have to calculate. And then we reference this in the PowerPoint. There's 80 questions on the national. There's 40 questions on the state, but then there's also up to 5, as many as 10, maybe 5 to 10 pre-test questions, sample questions. You won't know that they are, but they're testing the test question. They're not testing you. Okay, here's the score. We already saw that. So this is Relink. Get familiar with it. There's the $156 reference, $100 to the commission to apply, $56 for PSI for the test. And here's where you would go to register for your PSI test. You go to their website. You could also do it by phone. Schedule it by phone. So look through that Relink. And by the way, don't forget, we do have a homework assignment for tomorrow that is testing you about the Relink book. So I will make sure that's available to you as well. Okay. We've talked about the syllabus. That was this. We've talked about the Relink book. Now, here is the PDF of the real estate license law. We're not going through this. I'm just going to show what it looks like. We need to put like pictures or something pretty. Chapter 93A, that's a license law thing. And then the next section in that big book is this PDF 58. Subchapter 58 is a commission rule item. And so let's look at a commission rule item, proof of licensure. It's a commission rule that we have to carry around either a pocket card proving that we have a license or an image of our pocket card. And people do that wrong all the time. When I have post-licensing classes, they come in to register for the class the first day, and I say, can I see your pocket card? And they look at me funny because they don't have it. But the commission says, commission rule, we've got to carry it. Show that we have a real estate license. That's a sort of difference between a law and a rule. And then here is the great equalizer, the thing that kind of helps you steer this ship of real estate law and rule is the comments section. This is what is in the back of this is in the back of your textbook. If you buy that $6.50 printed version of the full license law commission rules, this is the last section of that. I would at least print this PDF out. It's like 30 pages. And it talks about the requirement for a license. And then look, it references the law that says what the license is. If you go to Google and type North Carolina GS 93A-2, it will show you the actual license law talking about a broker license. So that might be a good study tip. If you want to see the actual license law, just do a Google search for it. And then it goes down through, sometimes it references license laws. Sometimes it references, let's see, here we go. Where is it? I'm looking for a commission rule and it's not showing me one. If it says something 58, then that's a commission rule. So read through, let's see, comment section, at least the first 4 pages. Read through that for tomorrow as well. And we're going to talk more about that. Oh, shoot, I blew right past the break. By the way, feel free to remind me about breaks. Sometimes I'll do pretty well when we get like into the course, but I'm kind of free forming right now, so I'm not on top of it as much as I should be. I didn't mean to test your bladders, but I'll see you in 10. We'll knock out these last 40 minutes or so. Welcome back. Good to have you back. Let's knock out these last 30 minutes or so. Okay. Commission rules, license law comments. That's where we left off. You're going to try to read through the first 4 pages of that for tomorrow. Later in the course, it's going to be a while, but I'll add this to the Google Drive. You won't need to do anything with this for a while. But all it is what we are required to do if we measure a house. What is the agent's requirement to measure? What we'll learn about is the Real Estate Commission does not require us to report the square footage. So if the test question says, does the Real Estate Commission consider square footage to be a material fact? Then the answer to that is no, they do not. They don't care. Some markets don't even talk about square feet. Can you imagine? Do you think you'd like that? I've just gotten so used to it. But some places, some markets just don't even talk about it. What the Real Estate Commission of North Carolina does say is, if you do report it, it better be accurate. And then what the Multiple Listing Service says is you have to report it. They want you to put it in. Now that you have to put it in to satisfy them, the commission says, well, you better get it right. And here's how to do it. So that's what this is. You don't have to measure it yourself, by the way. You could hire it out to be done. Hire somebody better than you, right? Because you're still responsible for it. If it comes out wrong, oh, that's a nice camera angle. Let me fix that. If it comes out wrong, it's on you. So make sure that you get somebody good at it. Oh boy. Okay, there we go. Where are we? Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, I think I mentioned this already. The syllabus section number is not necessarily going to match up with the unit number in the textbook, but I will provide you a resource that will show you what's what. Hopefully by tomorrow. Told you about the levels. Level 1 is just, oops, sorry, I'm not sharing what I want to. Okay. That's where I'm at. So I was just telling you about this. And then now level 1 is definitions. Level 2 is a little more than that. Need to be able to explain stuff. Level 3 is compare, contrast, be able to go in and out and kind of really know the depths of things. What else is out there? Lots of stuff. Google things, right? It's all about test preparation. And after you get a good chunk of the content under your belt, now's time to shift toward practice exams. We give you some stuff. We give you a quarter of the way exam. We give you a midterm exam. We give you a 3/4 of the way exam. But there's other ones you can buy. There's other resources available, and I will leave those for you. If you run across something, but let me know what you found and ask me if it's something that I've heard of or that might be useful or might not be actually good. So Google is a good resource. YouTube, of course, there's going to be, if you just YouTube North Carolina real estate exam, you're going to find resources. Go for the newer stuff versus the older stuff. There's a good resource that some of you might have already heard of, and the gentleman's name is Travis Everett. Travis Everett, anybody can nod if you've heard. He's got a pretty developed YouTube channel. He's been posting his classes, the entire class session, for a few years now. He's got like some of those videos are 40,000 views, and it's the same textbook as what we use. That's good news. So it'll be referencing the same kind of topics in the same unit numbers, right? Travis Everett. It's referenced in like, I think an intro email that you got, but I'll write it here. There it is. He teaches at another real estate school, but he posted, and I'm working on it. In fact, I'm going to have every one of our sessions together available for you as well. Tonight, I'm going to have to post it, but normally I'm just going to hit the live stream. And as soon as we're done, in fact, as we're doing it, it'll be going. But as soon as we're done, it'll be right there. I don't have to do any extra work, which is really cool for me because that post editing stuff can really suck up the time. And don't forget, there's another resource called Quizlet. Anybody heard of Quizlet? Go to Quizlet.com. It's all kinds of textbooks that people have used to make flashcards, online flashcards. Just look up this textbook name, Modern Real Estate Practices, North Carolina, 10th edition. The 9th would probably be okay too, but there are some differences. So just to be safe, use the 10th edition. Yep, Darlene, that's a good summation. First 3-4 pages of the comment section PDF, the chapter 1, and that syllabus/relink quiz for tomorrow. Okay. Common questions that we get, and feel free to ask me some of this stuff, in between class time, but I'll just talk about it here just to kind of put the elephant out there on the table to mix some metaphors. How much will you make the first year? Well, I think you probably know the answer to this. How many people have somebody in your life who's an agent and they did great? You'd be happy making what they made. Yeah, maybe partly why you're here, right? How many know somebody who's maybe not doing so well? The average income across the board is somewhere around 55,000, according to the National Association of Realtor Statistics. But there's plenty of people who don't make anything. Then there's some people that make a lot. There's a good free coach out there. There's a handful of resources of free coaching out there. There's a lot of agents that are doing some old school things. As elaborate as we get with social media, it's the old school stuff that continues to work. Cold calling, door knocking of all things. I just can't bring myself to do it. Not that you shouldn't. Your BIC might say, give it a try, but there's a lot of ways to build your business. There are agents making $1 million a year, and they're not huge teams either, right? Just depends on how you craft it and what you do. So it's a combination of your network. There have been brand new agents that just had a great resource of people they know. Maybe their spouse is in some corporate job and has a bunch of people, and they just roll with a bunch of people in a certain price point. And you're 1 year in the business and you're selling $1 million houses, and you only need to sell a couple of those and you're making some serious money. $1 million house, 3% of $1 million is $30,000. And you're splitting it with the company and this and that and the other, but it's still hard to not end up with some money when you start with $30,000, right? You do a couple of those a month or nothing, but normally it's going to take a while to get going. You're going to have to learn how to do lead generation. That's the typical progression. You come out of here knowing the laws and the rules. You're chomping at the bit to know how to do the business. We teach you how to fill out forms and contracts and how to make offers. And a lot of it is OJT, on the job training. But you start really focusing hard on how to build the business, how to get the leads. You get one. You put all your energy into that one because you got something that could turn into money. Then you kind of slack off on the lead generation. You were making calls and doing things. That had to take a hit because you're focusing on the real. And then there's the roller coaster, right? When you find that perfect combination of lead generation and doing real estate while actually learning it too, that's the perfect storm. That's the thing that's it's hard to do. And you'll never get it perfect. It's just, you got to acknowledge it. You got to have a lead generation component, whatever that is. If you have a decent network of people, start loving on them. Call them, but don't talk about real estate much. Don't be the pest that only talks about what you're doing and what benefits you, right? That's the big mistake. You want to say, hey, how are you doing? Or if you meet somebody new, it's like, what do you do for a living? Inevitably, they will come back around and ask you that question too. But you don't lead by throwing your card in their face, right? All that stuff is what you'll learn once you're actually in the business. Your network, it's who you align yourself with. It's how teachable you are. Acknowledge there's plenty of agents that are 5 years in the business and they just think they already know everything. And they are dead wrong. As a 26-year plus agent, I don't know everything. In fact, when I was brand new, I was 23 years old, fresh out of college. I was scared to death somebody was going to call me out. I lived at home. great situation to be brand new in real estate. I passed the first time because that's all I had to do, and I was fresh out of college, and I knew how to pass tests because I had no excuse not to, because that's what I just had been doing. So I was fortunate enough that still worked for me. Didn't have many expenses, and I was scared to death somebody was going to jump out of the bushes and say, "You don't even own your own house. Why are you helping me?" And they never did. But I grew out the beard. I wore the shirt and tie to look older than I really was. Now I'm trying to look in the opposite, trying to Benjamin Button this thing. Not working so great. But you need to always learn new stuff. Then 2008 hit, 12 years after I got in the business, and we had to learn what foreclosures and short sales were. I didn't even know what a short sale was at that point. Didn't have to. But then the market shifted significantly, and we learned all kinds of new things that we didn't really want to have to know. How to deal with distressed sale properties. So it's a constant evolution. And then you could certainly get overwhelmed by what there is to learn, but you start small, right? How to eat an elephant, bite at a time. Pick something to be a specialist and expert in. Are you a military person? Then learn about VA loans. Be the expert about VA loans and tell the world about it. Oh, if there was only a way you could talk to the whole world. Good thing there is, right? Here's your video camera. Here's your resource to talk to everybody, right? And tell them how smart you are about that thing. And by them seeing how good you are at that one little thing, they're going to assume you're good at all the other things too. That's just how it works. Don't we meet somebody who knows more than we do about one thing? Even if it's only one little fact they tell us and we're like, oh, wow, they're really smart. That may be the only thing they know that you didn't. But use that to your advantage on this end, right? And then here's what I'm guilty of. The old saying, perfection is the enemy of progress. Don't wait to be perfect. Just get out there and do it and make mistakes until you get good at it. Doing first, learning later. I have something in my background that says that same thing. Okay, here's how much some money is going to be. Here's what you're looking at for outlays of some money. It costs about $500 between the course and the book. Okay. To take the exam and apply with the commission is about $156. To renew your license every year, about $45 to take. Sorry, I got a little smudge here. Post licensing courses within those 18 months. By the way, some firms require you to do it sooner. Some firms are telling me we want it done in 6 months, not 18 months. Whatever it is, it's going to be about $200 a piece for all three. So about $600 for the post licensing courses. And then to do your continuing education every year, it's about $50 per course, and you have to take 2 of them. There's a update requirement, and there's also an elective of your choice. Anything you want. There's plenty of CE electives to pick from. Every class you take related to real estate, this pre-licensing class, all the posts, and CE electives, all of those can be self-directed. You could take a post-licensing without me yelling at you in real time. I wouldn't really want to personally, but some agents do it because it fits. They don't have to show up at 5:30 or whatever time. They can just hit the play button. Even CE electives have been that way forever. You can take a 4-hour CE elective without having to go to a class, without even having to do Zoom. You just hit the play button and watch it. And it tests you along the way to make sure you actually sat there and completed it. Even pre-licensing is like that. That to me seems harder than it needs to be. I just don't anticipate a lot of success with a non-instructor-led pre-licensing course, but it's available as of the last couple of years ago. Your CE adds up to about $100. MLS, to have access to the multiple listing service, about $700, $800, somewhere in there. They don't charge you the whole thing. As soon as you get in the business, they will prorate it and they'll charge you quarterly for your MLS access. Realtor dues are about $600 a year, 6 or 7, might be 700 by now. That comes out in January. And I'm anticipating an interesting January. When those realtor dues come due, there might be some people who don't want to renew. And if you don't renew your realtor dues, you can't call yourself a realtor. By the way, there's only one A in realtor. It's not realtor. It's realtor. From here forward, that's how you say it. right? I have a feeling that at least one of you might have been saying realtor. Just a little pet peeve. People know what you're doing if you know how to pronounce that. They know that you know what you're doing. So there's some other things that might kick in, but sometimes a lot of times the firm will provide lock boxes or signs or give you 1,000 business cards. And then your marketing, your website, whatever you do to try to sell something is going to be all over and above. So, I mean, this easily adds up to a couple of $3,000. Hopefully you have that available. Don't think that you can spend $500 on this course and then start making money. You're going to have to at least join the MLS, become a realtor. Most firms require you to become a realtor. And then, of course, take the post-licensing within the 18 months. So what are your choices? You could be your own little one person. I'm my own person. I happen to be on my own firm, but that's the way most people start. You could also join a team. There are big teams, and they want a brand new person, and they're just going to hand you a buyer lead. You work that buyer, show them some houses, get them under contract. You hand the file over to an office person to handle the closings, and you get a new lead and you go on and get them under contract. You're learning one small part of the business, but the good part of that is you're getting leads. You don't have to do your own lead generation. The bad part is you pay for the privilege. So while as a general brokerage person all by yourself working for a firm, like say, whether it's like Remax, well, as a new agent, you probably not necessarily would start there, but like a EXP or a Keller Williams or something, you might be looking at an 80-20 split or 70-30 split where you keep 70% of the commission and you give them 30. But if you're on a team, they're feeding you leads, that split in your pocket might be like 40% to you, maybe 50, because they're giving you leads. That's how valuable leads are. But hey, I know some people that are very capable, very sharp agents. They started out in a team and they did it for about a year until they learned the ropes and maybe built up enough of sort of a book of business people that loved them because they won them over because they took good care of them. Then they left and either became their own agent or maybe left the firm altogether. There's all kinds of routes to a successful experience. New home construction. There's that. They don't have to have a license to be in that model home necessarily because they're selling a product for their boss. But a lot of times the builders do want them to have a license. So you could sell new homes. And there's another thing where the lead generation is not really on you so much. You're just sitting there receiving. It's like you're doing open houses all the time. The downside of it is they want you there most weekends. Your weekend is probably like Monday or Tuesday. But the Saturday, Sunday is a prime time for people to be out there looking at new houses. So therefore, you're not going to have a typical weekend there. But you could make 6 figures pretty quick if you get the right neighborhood and learn fast enough. You could also be a licensed assistant. I think we have at least one unlicensed assistant in the class. I forgot which one that was. But they will be a licensed assistant, and maybe they'll decide to actually do more than just assistant work. But it all comes down, the differences between all of those comes down to lead generation. Okay. Let's dig in to some license law and commission rules. It's at least 10 of the 40 questions on the state portion, right? We saw that in the Relink book. Here's the Relink book. And we're going to talk about some different objectives. The recall is like level 1 stuff. The apply is level 2 and the analyze is level 3. Sometimes I might give you like a battery, like a 3-part battery, like on your cell phone image that shows level 1, 2, or 3. So you'll see a variety of indications of what level things are. And sometimes I'll tell you, this is very important. Write this down. Here's where it all starts. Who needs a license? I already gave you that answer earlier. If you're doing real estate for somebody else in exchange for something of value, you need a license. What if you're doing real estate for yourself? You're selling your own house. Do you need a license to sell your own house? No. For sale by owner. They don't need to have an agent. They don't need to have a license. They're doing it themselves because it's their own property. It's all about that other person. What if you're doing it for grandma and you're paying your side? You're in the duplex, grandma's duplex, but you're paying rent to grandma. She's not giving you free rent. You're paying the rent. You're just doing the property management handling the other side, getting a tenant in there, collecting the rent for her. You're doing real estate for her, but you're not charging her to do it. You're just doing it because you love your grandma. Do you need a license for that? No. See the difference? You got the difference already. Great job. The difference between whether you're getting paid or not is what that test question might hinge on. So be reading it carefully and just see if all of three of those things are applicable. Let me catch up on the chat here. VA appraisals, military spouses, brokers doing sign. Yeah, you bet. Oh, wow, that sucks. They don't update the MLS. Can you turn them into the MLS? Because that's just, I'm not one to turn people in, but that's just bad for the business and for consumers to not have accurate data. Maybe once you belong to the MLS, you can. Yeah, that's tough. We're going to talk about, boy, it's hard. Now you have to, it takes longer to call people, but, okay, good question, Fernanda, about dual agency. When we get into agency chapters 7 and 8, we're going to have to talk about dual agency, and what she's referring to is the situation of, as a dual agent, it might be that it's one agent between two parties, the buyer and the seller, and there's only one agent in the middle. They may or may not be a dual agent, but because I'm on my own, I could choose to do it as a dual agent. If I have a listing and a buyer calls me on my sign, if I don't want to be a dual agent, I don't have to do it. I could still be the only agent in the transaction though, because I could just tell that buyer, look, you're on your own. I will provide the forms. I'll even show you how to fill them out, but I can't give you any advice. I'm not your agent. I don't want to be your agent. I'm only going to work for my seller, or my seller won't let me be a dual agent for you. I'm only working for them. And you don't have your own agent. Are you okay with that? And they might be. They might say, hey, how hard could it be? No big deal. I'll be my own agent, and I could be the only agent in the transaction, but still not be a dual agent. When I am a dual agent, then I'm working for them both. And the downside of dual agency is I can't tell the buyer the lowest the seller might take, and I can't tell the seller the most money the buyer might be willing to pay. And I can't give either one of them an advantage over the other one. I've got to stay neutral. So I'm almost kind of useless when it comes to negotiating. If I'm a dual agent between two parties and that buyer says, well, okay, what's that house worth? Show me the research. Show me the report, the market analysis you did. Okay, here it is. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to me. What should I offer them? I would say, I can't tell you that because I'm a dual agent. You gave me permission to be a dual agent. I can't give you advice. They might not like that, right? You need to explain how all that works. We'll get more into it when we get to agency because it's its own big thing that we need to talk about. So no, I don't automatically have to be a dual agent because I'm on my own. I could say no, and I could still be the only agent involved. Odds are if that were to happen, they would say, well, forget it. I'll go find my own agent to represent me as a buyer, and I'll come back and make an offer on your property because I don't want to be an unrepresented buyer. So, good question. Wow. So you know that problem there, Gregor. You know, boy, you've had to call a lot of agents about valuation. That's good. Good to know how to do it. Some agents get kind of lazy. And if it's not in the MLS, they don't even bother to dig deeper. I had a listing and it was right at the start of COVID. And so everybody was scared about going into places as they should be, I suppose. Well, the appraiser didn't even make an appointment. My house went under contract, my listing. The appraiser just showed up and knocked on the door, and my seller was brand new, newborn baby. She wasn't by herself. Her mom was there, thank goodness. The appraiser just said, hey, I'm here to appraise it. And she's like, wasn't he supposed to make an appointment? Yes, he was, but he didn't. And he said, well, I need to walk through your house to get to the backyard, but I'm not going to go through your house because of COVID. I just need to go back there to take a picture. He didn't even measure. Appraisers are supposed to measure. He relied on my measurement. And he looked at comparables from the neighborhood. And around the corner on another street, there was a comparable house that sold the week before that was about 500 feet bigger and sold for about $10,000 less than our contract price. And he used it to figure out, to justify what he thought my listing was worth. And it came in $11,000 under asking price. And on the surface, you couldn't really tell what was up, but I knew something was up. So I called the listing agent on that one house, that one comp, because it was a bigger house that sold for so much less. And I said, what was up with this one? Was there anything unique, unusual? And she said, yeah, in fact, it was an estate. The owner died. The kids had it. They had to sell it. Is somebody who just gets a property probably going to maybe dump it a little more likely than maybe the person who actually lived there? On top of that, they sold it to their friend. So it was an estate sale, which tends to go for less, and they sold it to somebody. It wasn't an arm's length transaction. They sold it to somebody they liked. So that wasn't a very accurate comp, and it wasn't shown or mentioned anywhere in the multiple listing service listing. And so I complained. I made an appeal to challenge the appraisal, and the first step in the appeal is go back to the appraiser and say, hey, are you sure? Do you want to try again? And the appraiser said, oh yeah, I'm confident in my report. I'm not changing anything. And my seller had to make a decision. Do I want to take $11,000 less than what we agreed to, or to let this buyer go? This was probably 7 years ago. And I think we agreed to meet somewhere in the middle, if I recall. That's something that Gregor's asking, did I cut my commission to bridge that gap of $11,000 difference? No, I didn't. It's something that sometimes people suggest. Sure. It's nothing that I would be required to do if I'm willing to let that buyer walk. It depends on the whole picture. If it's something they suggest too soon and I don't think they're really trying to pull the deal together, I'll let the deal go over it. I don't owe that to them. I did what I was supposed to do. And you have to defend. If you're not strong enough to defend your commission, how can you be expected to defend the price for your client? Right? And that's what I tell the client. If I'm not strong enough to defend what I'm making and providing my family with, why would you even hire me to look out for your best interest? I'm not strong enough to look out for you either. And sometimes that works. But I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. If we're close enough and it's just like truly that the parties don't have the money and maybe the seller's desperate and the buyer's maxed out on what they can afford, I'm not going to let a potential $12,000, $15,000, $20,000 commission fall apart because I'm not willing to let go of $1,000 or a couple $1,000. Sometimes the agents will split and try to meet in the middle. Both parties come somewhere and the agents kick in a little bit too, but I don't want it to be an automatic. People like to keep squeezing when they see juice coming out, so to speak. How many real estate license types are there? Well, good news is just one. You get your broker's license, you can do any of these things. You can be a commercial broker. You can be a residential. You could do property management once you don't have provisional status anymore. You could be an auctioneer. It requires a real estate license to use auctioning as a way to sell property, to be an auctioneer. But you also have to have an auctioneer's license too. Need a broker license, but also an auctioneer's license. And then if you want to represent a tenant, meaning somebody needs to rent something, you could help them find something to rent. All of these things are going to be available to you once you have your broker license. Some of them are going to require you to get that post-licensing out of the way and become a full broker, not just a provisional broker. You can do commercial, residential, and tenant stuff as a provisional. The other two, you're going to need to have either more experience or that provisional status lifted, removed in order to get into those things. But in North Carolina, it's all considered a broker license. Other states might have a salesman's license and then a broker's license. We used to do it that way. Now it's all a broker's license. Sure, definitely you can do a mix. And many people who get into commercial start out in residential. And maybe somebody makes a call, they run across a person in their lead generation efforts that has some commercial property and they start dipping their toe in that water. But the real estate commission would say, if you venture into commercial, just make sure you have good guidance in commercial. Don't just try to wing it. Many times the first step toward commercial that a residential broker will do is a land sale, because dirt, a good old lot or a piece of acreage is surprisingly complex. It is considered commercial property. It is It's got EPA considerations, environmental protection. It's got depends on if it's near water. It could have coastal or I'm forgetting my terminology. It could, especially out in the coast where fresh water meets salt water, there's very delicate ecosystems, and so you just got to know a lot of things. There you go. Thank you, Gregor. Zoning. Big deal about zoning. Sometimes if you see a lot for sale that's too good to be true, it's because it won't support a septic system. There's no sewer lines from the city that far out, and you can't put a septic tank in because the dirt won't absorb the wastewater fast enough. We'll talk more about septic systems later. So you can do all this stuff. That's the broker license. And then here's the categories we've already touched on. Provisional broker is how you're going to start. And within 18 months or less, you'll become a non-provisional or a full broker. Warning, make a little note in your notes there. On the exam, the commission questions, the test questions are probably just going to call a non-provisional broker just the word broker by itself. But if you've just answered 3 questions in a row about provisional brokers, your tired mind might fill in the word provisional where it doesn't exist and accidentally try to answer the question as if they're talking about a provisional broker when they're not. Be careful. Make sure you go back through and think, oh, red flag Neil told me about. Is this a provisional broker or are they just talking about a regular non-provisional broker? Big difference in what you can do or not do. The broker in charge is responsible for the provisional. They're not as responsible for a non-provisional broker. Once you shed yourself of that provisional status category, the BIC is not as worried about you. They're only required to make sure that you're advertising properly and that you keep your license. You stay active and you stay current. But they're not hand-holding you anymore. They're not going to, unless you need it, unless you ask for it and they're willing to put you through the training, or if you screw up, they might want to make sure that you get better at something. But for the most part, if you're non-provisional, they're not on the hook with the commission. Therefore, they're not going to probably guide you as much as they were before. You don't need it as much because you already kind of learned the ropes. And then we talked about BIC eligible, broker in charge eligible status. It's available only to a full non-provisional broker. You have to have some experience, like at least 2 years of full-time real estate experience to become BIC or BIC eligible. So here's our provisional status. It's temporary. They might test you with that. What is a temporary status? Provisional, non-provisional, BIC, or BIC eligible? Provisional is the temporary one because it's got to be lifted, got to be done with your provisional status within 18 months. Complete the education. Now you've become a full broker. Here's what the education looks like. Any order you want, you take post licensing 301, 302, and 303. They all add up to 90 hours. That's the education within 18 months or sooner, right? If you take longer than those 18 months, what do you become? Inactive. That's an inactive broker right there, playing his video games, eating the chips. So that's what if you go past the 18 months, what if you were already inactive? It's just going to take more for you to go active. Because I remember I told you could take post licensing and not even be active. You could just have never sold a house, have never activated, not affiliated with the firm, but going through your post and getting all that out of the way. And then if you take longer than 18 months to do it, you can't be inactive. It's just going to demand more of you, take more stuff to get active when it's time to do that. So here's the gist of a provisional. You can't be independent. You got to be supervised by a broker in charge. That BIC is accountable for you. If you get called before the real estate commission, they are too. They'll drive you to Raleigh and they'll have to go in the building with you. But if you're non-provisional, full broker, they might drive you to Raleigh if they like you, but they're not going in the building with you. It looks like a courtroom, by the way. You sit there, appear before the 9 commissioners, and they say, hey, what happened? What's this? What went wrong? Tell us your side of the story. So completing the courses, then you can, non-provisional means you've completed the courses. It means that you can now act independently. You are accountable for your own actions but you most likely will still need to have a broker in charge. If you're going to do any sort of marketing or promotion, you need a BIC. That's even a business card, guys. Any promotion, any marketing, you can't tell anybody you're in real estate if you don't have a BIC of some sort. It could be yourself, but you still have to have a BIC if you have somebody working for you, a licensed person under you, agents under you, if you have a trust account, or if you do any sort of promotion, you still need a BIC. So the only way you could get away with not having a BIC if you're a sole proprietor is that you're just sitting around the house and never actually telling people you're in the business. You could make money. They could call you and say, hey, I remember you used to be in real estate. Can you refer me a person in Greensboro? And you could say, yeah, talk to this person. And that person could pay you a referral fee. But if you were proactive and told the whole world through a social media post or even a phone call, hey, call me for any referral needs, I'll refer a good agent to you. You've promoted, and now you've violated this rule. Now you need a BIC if you're out there promoting yourself. Even if you're not doing real estate, you're just being a referral agent. It's confusing, isn't it? But we'll get more into it. We're going to talk more about this license law commission rules stuff. It is 9:30. I'm going to let you go. I will be sending you your email an invitation to the Notion, which is the starting point for everything. That'll have the Google Drive link, and you'll be able to access all the stuff we've been telling you about. So you guys were great. Appreciate your involvement and participation. I'll see you at 5:30 sharp. If you can, please try to log in early. I won't bug you. You can mute and turn off your video, but that'll be helpful to make things smooth. So I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.